Yes, Council. The first, initially, we will provide the bio data and then the passport size photograph. But I think around 2013, 2014, there these two from the Office of the Secretary General asked for the full length photograph together with the bio data, and yes, from the bio data of the girls. Yes.
Where did this request come from, the full-length photograph of these girls?
Office of the Secretary General and Head of the Civil Service.
And do you know why this request was being made?
No, we don't know. But we were asking ourselves, why the full-length picture of the girls? Because if scholarships is only the passport size photographs. So what was done was we provided what was asked for, and it was I think at that time the Honorable Minister was not in town, the Permanent Secretary was not in town, but it was the Deputy Permanent Secretary who replied the letter to the Office of the Secretary General and Head of the Civil Service.
So initially these photograph pictures, which included the face of the contestants, was supplied to the Office of the President.
Yeah.
But subsequently that was not enough. They asked for full-length photographs.
Yes.
And can you tell us how you went about obtaining these photographs?
As I said, we have regional structures. We have regional education offices, so we contact our regional education offices. And, the gender focal points are in these regional education offices. So they help us get the pictures of the girls. And also
so they had to assemble all of these girls together again and take additional photographs, which you then sent to the Office of the President?
No. They just send in their photographs and their biodata.
They were asked to take photographs on their own?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happened subsequently with the information you received?
Nothing whatsoever. That was the last time we heard from the Office of the Secretary General.
I mean, how did you transmit that information to the Office of the Secretary General?
Yeah, because it was the Secretary General that wrote to the Honorable Minister. And as I said, when we were replying, the Honorable Minister was not in town. Our Permanent Secretary too was not in town. So it was the Deputy Permanent Secretary that was around. So he replied to the Secretary General with the pictures.
Who was the Deputy Permanent Secretary at that time?
He is now our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Ibrahim Masisao.
And who was the Secretary General at the time?
I cannot remember because they were moving. I couldn't remember then. I couldn't remember.
In terms of the contestants from the scholarship pageant, were any one of them given the opportunity to work at State House, as far as you know?
That's from information that we get because it didn't pass through our office. We don't know. So I just sat one day and one of my colleagues told me, do you know that so-and-so is at State House working as a protocol officer? Yes, we know, but it has never passed through our office as a ministry. But they do. I think I know of two.
Perhaps what you could do is that we'll just send a paper to you, and then you can just write down the names of these girls that you were informed about.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Apart from some of the girls being employed as protocol officers, did you hear of any unusual events that happened to any of these girls?
No, it was not until... Is it okay for me to say the date? Because if we talk about the date, people may know. And I'm very concerned with the confidentiality and the protection of these girls. But there was a time...
That is fine. You can mention the date.
Yeah.
And then if you need to mention a particular name,
yes,
or perhaps don't mention names, write them down for us on the piece of paper, which we will supply.
I would prefer that. So it was this particular... I was not in town when it happened, but a certain incident happened with a particular girl that we never suspected, was happening. So what I did was I contacted the mom. When I came back, I went straight to the mom and I asked her what I'm hearing that is happening, because it was all over social media. How can this happen? Because as far as we know, these girls, when they go to any event, they are accompanied by chaperones, and the chaperones are the first to be in the vehicle, and they are last to leave the vehicle, because that one is a matter of must, that they will be first in the vehicle, or even if they are to meet somewhere, converse somewhere, they wait for everybody, and after the event, the chaperone is the last, one or at least one chaperone will be the last to leave the vehicle. So how can this happen? Then she laughed. She told me, Tida, you don't know what is going on. He said, after my daughter took part in this event, it was then that somebody, I don't want to call name again, visited their house, and said they want to help in a different way. But I told the mom that that's not true.
Can you just perhaps tell us, just to be more specific, what position that person was in, and where they were working?
Okay. This person is a protocol officer, and this person was working at the office of the president. So it was after this incident happened, and I was not in town, but when I came back, because I was getting calls from my colleagues, and I had to advise them to stop calling me. When I come back, we will see what we can do. But at that particular point in time too, the authorities in the ministry has taken action. But I wanted to know how it happened, because we were able to, make a lot of precautions to make sure that these girls are protected. So I went to the mom and I asked the mom, how does it happen? Because I cannot understand. And she laughed. She told me, Tida, you don't know what's going on. So it's this particular person that came to my house and said that the office, I'm trying to say it in a way that, it will not affect.
If perhaps, if you don't mind, that is, if you have no objection to that, you can name the person that you are referring to, if you feel comfortable enough. Otherwise, as I said, we will give you a piece of paper to write the name of.
Okay. Yes, she told me that this person came to my office and my house and said they help the winners. So we want to know your situation. But I told the mom that that's not true, because the main prize of the event is scholarships.
Can you just tell us, just so that we can understand you better, what information you had initially received that led to your investigations?
Can you please allow me? I still want to protect this girl. Can you allow me just to write it on paper?
Yes.
I don't want to say anything regarding to that, because people will know.
Without revealing the name of the girl, tell us what happened to her. That's what I meant.
Can I write that down too? Because people will know.
I don't necessarily think so. Just tell us what information you received, and tell us, and write down the name of the girl. Thank you for that information. Whatever the case, just do what makes you feel comfortable. Are you comfortable in telling us what information you had received?
I will not say it, because if I say it, it will be public knowledge, and I don't want that to happen. Okay. But I can tell you in private, in camera.
That's fine. Perhaps you could also write that down then.
Okay, I can.
Can you tell us whether it was a form of sexual violence?
To my knowledge, the information I have was not sexual violence, no.
And after that, what information did you receive from the girl's mother?
Yes, she just told me that this is what happened. But I don't want also, because at that particular point in time, she was very disturbed. To me, she looks very disturbed. So I don't want to probe. But what made me glad was the girl was, she was like safe, and I was okay with that for that moment. But normally, I talk to the mom, and I try to counsel her as much as she can. And I think she can attest to that too.
Did you subsequently receive any information that led you to know or believe what actually happened to this particular girl?
It was at a later stage, just recently, that I received information. Yeah, it was at a later stage, because at that particular time, I didn't know what exactly had happened. Something happened, and that prompted me to go to the mom and talk to the mom. But it was just recently that I knew some of the things that allegedly happened to her.
Can you tell us what you heard allegedly happened to her?
That she was sexually abused.
And before this happened, do you know whether or not, perhaps you could tell us what the allegations are as to who sexually abused her?
Yes, she was sexually abused by the president, the former president of the republic.
And subsequent to that, or rather prior to her being sexually abused by the president, was she seen in close proximity to the ex-president?
As I told you, I don't attend these events, so I don't know. And the funny thing about everything is, we never get complaints, because as I tell you, when you see one of them, you will see them running and hugging me. That's the relationship I have with them. But nobody has ever come and complain or even give us a gist of that this is happening. We never have complaints, never, from the parents and also from the girls themselves.
Mrs. Jaju, all of the information you have provided so far is basically information you have received. We understand that you do not have personal knowledge of these events. So the question is directed to whether you received information about the whereabouts of this particular girl during the time when this sexual abuse allegedly happened, and whether or not she was in close proximity to the president or seen at State House, for example. That is what I was asking.
Yeah. As I told you, I don't have information until recently. I didn't have information until recently about the alleged sexual abuse. So it would be difficult for me to know whether they were in close proximity. And as I said too, that I don't attend these events, so I don't know.
Did you receive any information to suggest that she was seen at State House, for example?
In 2000, and let me not talk about it because that was the point. But there was a time, because normally when they have, girls, when they are together, we have our issues. When they have issues, I will call them and I will meet them and I will talk to them in the office. So there was this time around, one of them said, because I think they had a WhatsApp group or something like that, but I had one of my colleagues give me this information that these guys are having petty talks among themselves. And the information is, one of them said that her aunt saw this particular girl in Kanilai. But that was not what we knew of. So I called them for a meeting, and I asked this particular girl, have you been in Kanilai? She said, no, Auntie Tida, I've not been there. So I had to address them individually. So that's one instance when one of the girls accused the other one of the aunt seeing her in Kanilai. That's only one of the instances, and I addressed the issue with them. that if you are not sure of something, don't try and speculate.
Apart from this particular girl who suffered sexual abuse at the hands of the ex-president, do you know of any other girls from the pageants who did?
I don't, because as I told you, nobody has ever reported, and no parent too has ever reported the case, or even give us a gist, no.
Do you know of any of the pageant girls who were subsequently employed as protocol officers?
Yes, I told you I know two of them, but it was not through our office.
Can you please write those down as well for us?
Okay.
Do you know under what circumstances these two girls would actually, the circumstances under which these two girls were employed as protocol officers at the State House?
I don't know.
What about in terms of the scholarships that were awarded to girls personally by the president? Do you know under what circumstances these scholarships were given to them, and whether or not they actually completed their studies?
I don't know, but for this, to answer to your second part of the question, I know of, I think, one or two who couldn't continue because the money, the funding was not forthcoming. I cannot remember exactly their names, but I learned that one or two couldn't continue because the funding was not forthcoming.
So what happened after the funding was not forthcoming? What happened to these girls?
I think I saw one. I'm active on social media, and I think I saw one who graduated recently, and I was counting the number of years that she has to spend to graduate, but she successfully graduated in UK.
You also mentioned a particular name as facilitating some of these pageant girls to be protocol officers and facilitating their presence at State House. I don't believe that you gave us the name. If you're comfortable to name them, that's fine. Otherwise, then you would have to write.
Can I write it down, please?
Thank you.
And the issue is not facilitating for them to be protocol officers, but for them to be ushers, not protocol officers, ushers.
Apart from facilitating for them to be ushers, do you know if they facilitated any other things to happen in terms of the ex-president?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge until I but I had a discussion with the mom when something happened to the girl that I'm talking to you about, that I told you about earlier on. So when I had a discussion, that was the time the mom told me that this particular lady, the one I just wrote, visited them at home.
And you've mentioned the protocol officers as well that used to deal with some of these girls. You haven't mentioned them. Can you give us the names?
The other two?
Are you not comfortable to mention them?
Their
names are not protected.
Yeah, yes. But you have one. The Sanajaju once called me, and then I think Bori. He was a teacher. I think Bori Koli, the one who was the National Assembly member. I think it's Bori Koli. He also once called me, but that one is for official events, for girls to attend official events.
And under what circumstances did they call
it was official event, I think. It was an official event. It was, I think, for the summer, I can vividly remember, it was Gamo at State House. But Bori, I think, is an order for official event, but I cannot remember that one.
You've already told us that there were also other occasions on which you did not receive calls, but the girls were subsequently seen at State House.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. These are not occasions, but some of them are occasions, but some of them too, the oddly of our former honorable minister will see them and he will tell me.
And it was during those occasions when they were not afforded the protective measures that you had in place at the Ministry of Education that such incidents of sexual abuse occurred on these girls. Is that correct?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm conscious about the time because it's break, but I will need some time with the witness, perhaps about 15 or 20 minutes, but I would prefer to do it after the break rather than continuing now because there's some housekeeping matters we need to attend to during the break and then come back.
Let's take the break now and come back in 30 minutes, and during the break we can do a bit of logistics.
Indeed. Thank you very much,
right?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's fine.
Splendid. Meeting is adjourned for 30 minutes. We're back at 12:05. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Witness.
Good afternoon.
I hope you had a good break.
Yes, I did.
All right, thank you very much. Just before the session ended, you were actually telling us about instances, perhaps where the ex-president had sponsored certain girls to go on overseas trip and did not honor his commitment at the end. Can you tell us some of the examples that you know about or you've heard about what happened to these girls subsequently?
I think it's hard about. I think as I said earlier on, one that I heard about that she was sponsored for a year and then the funds were not forthcoming. But not a year. I cannot remember. It would be difficult for me to say how many semesters or years. But this particular one, later the funds were not forthcoming, but I saw her graduating just recently. Early this year, I saw her in the gown.
And do you know what happened to her? Did anything happen to her? After she came back, after she was returned home?
The one that came back you're talking about. Yeah, you know, these girls will get discouraged because the one I told you is the one with our knowledge. There is this one too. We are not informed of her scholarship. We just had her that she went, and she spent, I think, 1 semester. She came back, and when she came back, her passport was taken away from her, and the scholarship was stopped. She couldn't go back again. But I later learned that she got married.
Do you know who these girls are without revealing their identity? I will give you a copy of the protected information sheet for you to write down their names. Are you able to provide their names?
Yes, I can give you the name.
Mr. Usher, kindly hand over the sheet to her. Thank you. If you look at the sheet in front of you, you'll see the persons 1 to 4. Can you please list these 2 individuals as persons 5 and 6, please? Thank you. Can I just clarify whether person 4 would be the person that you received information from directly under the purview of the Ministry of Education, and 5 would be the information you later received about that particular person?
Sorry, Council, I just started writing and it's the other way around.
That's fine. You tell me then how you wrote it. Thanks. Thank you very much, Madam Witness, for providing that information, and sorry for not providing proper guidance to you at the beginning. Please tell us about person 5. She was the one that you were describing before I interrupted you.
Yes, she was. She won. I think she came third in one of the editions. I will not call the year. And eventually, I want to give you also a bit of an additional information on her later. And we just heard that she has gone overseas. Then all of a sudden, my colleague in the office told me that she's back, but her passport was confiscated and she's not going back. And I said, why? She said she doesn't know, and then it was later that I heard she got married. But I just want to give you one additional line on that one.
Confidential information that you would want to include on the information sheet.
Yes.
That's fine. But perhaps whilst you're doing that, I would just like to ask some follow-up questions.
Yeah.
On who sent her to, who sponsored her trip overseas, rather?
The former president of the republic.
And he later discontinued the sponsorship.
Yes, he was. Yes, he came back, and then her passport was confiscated, and then.
Do you know if anything else happened to her apart from that?
No, not really.
Do you know?
I know that she got married later. So.
Do you know whether or not there was any effect on her of the events that happened?
Obviously, yes. Her moral was down. Their confidence was down. Self-esteem was down. And that could happen to any other person.
She was disappointed, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did anything else happen to her apart from that?
No, not to my knowledge.
And you've also mentioned the individual that was reported directly to your ministry as well, who was also sponsored by the ex-president Jammeh, and basically he failed to also continue the sponsorship. Is that correct?
Yeah, but fortunately, she graduated because I saw her on social media.
And how did she graduate? Was
don't
it
know.
through the assistance of the ex-president?
No, because the funds were not forthcoming. I think she did it on her own.
So in terms of the funding that was coming from the ex-president, that was a disappointment to her as well. She was disappointed.
Yeah, that could be.
Just going back to the beginning of your testimony, just to round up and conclude, because we're almost finishing. You mentioned that the scholarship pageant was different from the normal beauty pageants one would have, in that it was basically intelligence and talent and perhaps education that was being showcased to empower young girls at that point. Did anything change after that in regards to the scholarship pageant? Was beauty perhaps given a greater focus than it was given before?
Yes, I think it was from 10 points to 20 points. I couldn't remember. I don't want to say this phrase. I couldn't remember, but it was between 10 and it could be 10, but it's from 1 point to another. But I think it was from 10 to 20, something like that, points out of a total point of 100. Yes.
So beauty was given more of a focus afterwards.
Yeah, later, yes. If the request for them to attend events don't pass through our ministry, it's difficult to trace them at party because they are living with their parents. So it's always difficult to trace them where they are. But as I said earlier on, there are instances that we will get information that they are seen at State House. Especially as I said earlier on, the oddly to the Honorable Minister will say, I've seen so and so at State House. But it's difficult for us to trace them because they are living with their parents. So it's always difficult for us to trace them, during these times when their events.
Yes, I understand that. I just wanted to understand whether or not you would draw the conclusion that they would not have been protected at this time because the request did not go through your ministry.
Exactly, that's very obvious. Yeah, because the separate one, it's a great deal. It's a big deal, when they are with them. Yeah.
And please remind us what age range these girls were usually.
Okay, mostly they are senior secondary age, but not most of the time. I think there are only 1 or 2 instances when we have 16-year-olds, but mostly they are 17, 18, and 19. And you have tertiary; those are above 18, and those range. The tertiary range from, I'm sorry, from 18 to 20s in their 20s.
What about the protocol girls? You mentioned 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what ages they were?
I don't know of protocol girl 1, the first one. I don't know the age she started working there. But I can vividly remember that the protocol girl 2 was there when she was 17, that she started working. At the latter part of her 17 years, then into her 18.
So she was employed as a protocol officer, notwithstanding the fact that she was still underage.
Yes, she was 17.
And did you know of any situations in which these girls traveled with the ex-president?
Yeah, there was one, I think 2 instances. And the first one, yes, 2. Those that's winners of the 2009. I think they set in 2009. Yes, I could remember the winner. The first one up in 2009. They traveled together as a group, and then there's this one that is the protocol number 2. I was not in town, but I came back and I was told that she traveled with the president. That is protocol number 2 in that protected list.
And she was obviously underage, like you mentioned.
Exactly.
What were the ages of these 2 other pageant girls that you knew had traveled with the president?
Okay, yes. Yeah, the other 2, she was in tertiary. They were almost over 20 years. They were in tertiary.
Were they accompanied by anybody?
No, they were not.
Okay. And was this request made through the ministry?
Yes, it was made through the ministry because we were asked to check about their passports and all that, and everything was taken care of.
So under what circumstances did they travel with the president? What was the reason?
I don't know.
You said the request went through your ministry, is that correct?
Yes.
You did not bother to ask?
In fact, I am somebody who asks questions all the time, and most of us too do ask the questions. As I told you in our interview, these are alleged. I can't tell because I don't attend these events, and sometimes when you attend these events and you watch interactions, you can draw conclusions. But if you don't attend the events, you don't know what happened there. It will be difficult for you to draw conclusions.
I completely understand that, Madam Witness. You did say that most of this information was given to you by another third party. And I am just asking, according to the information that you received, was it not the case that it was in these circumstances that these pageant girls were allegedly sexually abused? That was my question, according to the information that you received.
Especially taking cue from the most recent information, and the information I told you about the mother of the girl that I talked to.
Just perhaps kindly tell us which girl you're referring to. Just keep the protected information sheet in front of you for future use. Thank you.
No, yeah. It's not in that list, but it's in the pad that the lead counsel gave me, the neon color pad.
Yeah, please just add the name to this list. Thank you.
So it was person 7 now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kindly tell us.
Yes, when something happened, then I had to approach the mom and talk to the mom. Then I start to be skeptical about these things, and it was of late. It was very late.
What do you mean that you started to be skeptical? Please.
No, because
explain.
I was wondering how can this happen? Because these girls are always, with separon, they're being protected. It's vehicle will come for them, the vehicle goes for them. So nothing can happen during that time. So how is this possible?
And you're actually referring to the particular girl that was sexually abused by the ex-president?
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you.
And you're referring to her in particular?
Yes.
And my question was that most of these events, or perhaps these incidents, I would say, occurred during the times when the ministry was not aware. So they were not chaperoned. None of the protective measures that you had in place was applied. So they were at the mercy of the ex-president. Is that not correct?
I agree 100%.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe we've come to the end of the questions that I've had for you, but I just have one matter to deal with in terms of procedure, and that is to actually tender the protected information sheet. I would just like to go through it with you just briefly before we tender it. I believe person 1 and 2 you had mentioned was in relation to those who were employed as protocol officers. And person 3 was a facilitator in terms of providing some of these pageant girls as ushers in certain events. And person 4 was the last person you mentioned. She was sexually abused by the ex-president. And person 5 and person 6 basically were sponsored by the ex-president, and their scholarships were subsequently discontinued. And person 7, I believe, is the same as person 4.
Yeah, allegedly, yes.
Yes, it's a reputation. Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like to tender the protected information sheet of the witness into evidence.
Thank you. Just to expedite the process, requests are granted.
Thank you. And the exhibit number is 0094. I will hand over the witness to you, Mr. Chairman. That's the end of her testimony. Thank you.
The number is also noted. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And thank you for questioning the witness. And thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Jatta, for coming to testify before the commission. I really appreciate it very much. It's an area that has lots of names to hold in confidence. So there's been quite a bit of traffic between you and the council on that one. But we want to thank you very much, Emma, for your testimony. Commissioners, if you have any questions, we may proceed. Bishop, you have the floor, followed by Ms. Commissioner Jones, followed by Commissioner Kinte, and followed by Imam Jallo. Thank you. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Tida, Jatta Jaju. What was the essence of the scholarship pageant for girls? Initially, you started with 100 girls, and then later on it was drastically reduced to 20 girls.
It was reduced to 22. Yes. Yeah. As I said, there was the essence was to help them improve upon their public speaking skills, their shyness, discover their talent, and all that. And it was reduced to 22 girls, but larger numbers of girls to do compete at regional level so that they will qualify to be in the final.
You did give us information that the ministries of basic education and the one for higher education were responsible for the payment of the scholarship. And two of them were done directly by the ex-president himself. So how these ministries have the money, to pay for all these scholarships?
And I think that one is obvious. The budget is in their budget line. They have a budget line for scholarship. And at ministry level too, at our level, at the Ministry of Education, we have a budget line for scholarships. So it's from those monies that is taken to pay for these girls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Jatta. I have a few questions for you. The first is in relation to the guidelines on sexual harassment. Is this enforced, or was it enforced, since we're looking up to January 2017? Was this enforced?
Yes, the guidelines, they are guidelines, and they, what we do is we sensitize teachers, we sensitize students on them. And we also, gave the guidelines to them to use. So it's a resource material for them.
And how effective do you think this has been?
Very effective, because I think that's why you have the Think Young Women, the Girls Agenda, and so on and so forth.
Okay. I think you also said that issues of sexual harassment are not usually reported.
Yes.
Right? What strategies do you have in place to ensure that boys and girls do speak up? Because if you do have the guidelines and you have you're sensitizing them, but they're not speaking up, in my opinion, that's not effective. So what strategies do you have in place to ensure that they do speak up?
In the guidelines, we even have the reporting mechanisms in the guidelines. How to report when you face cases when you encounter cases of sexual harassment. So the reporting mechanisms are there. We also have these Girls Speak Out conferences. And I think under FAWITU, you have the Tusime clubs, where they speak out. So normally, at our level as a ministry, most of the reportings are made. But at community level is another thing. That is one. Two, to report sexual harassment cases are reported. But we go up to the middle and we know what happens. The Maslaha syndrome in our societies, they tend to withdraw it. You understand what I'm talking about? But the ministry has lots of checks and balances in place, where to report to, how to report, and how to even recognize that this is sexual harassment or not, and how to negotiate yourself out of the situation.
I think the Maslaha syndrome is a big problem on its own, and I think that's something that we'll probably have to work on combating, because it obviously dissuades a lot of girls, or boys as well, from speaking up. My next question is in relation to the beauty pageant itself and
scholarship pageant.
The scholarship, thank you for the correction, and the subsequent information that you gathered about girls being seen either at State House or at Kanilai. Was there any formal investigation or probe, not going beyond just you, but the ministry itself, looking at the scale or magnitude of these issues so that measures could be taken to avert it?
Yeah, that was not done because most of them were hearsay. I told you it's of recent that we've you've been hearing more of these things. And as I said in my testimony, I informed the commission that I called these girls together and asked, and she's the one that was accused of going there or allegedly went there, told me that Auntie Tida, no, I didn't go. In my face. So, yes, I do.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to repeat and reiterate. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. Thank you.
Thank you. And those who have power should not use that power to abuse vulnerable and in some ways immature individuals. I didn't mean that to insult those people, but they were young and vulnerable, and the power was just used to abuse them. For them to be in a situation to negotiate themselves out of that, that may be okay. It may be possible for someone who is mature and has got some experience. But the burden is on those who have power and abusing these individuals. They should not do that. But thank you so much for coming to clarify a lot of things for us. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think you touched somewhere which is very important. And I think that's indecency to the highest order. You know, that's indecency, because you cannot expect somebody of power and somebody at that level to look at young and vulnerable girls like that, if that is the case. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much indeed for your testimony. Really appreciate it very much. Counsel, are we getting the next witness ready now, or do you want us to take an extended lunch break and come back at 2:30?
I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we take about 10 minutes to see if we can do the switch over, so that we can use any time that we have left before we take the lunch break, because I anticipate that a single session alone may not be sufficient for the next witness, so we should try to gain as much time as possible. Thank you.
Hey, Daniel, come to judgment. That's very good. Thank you. We'll do that. We'll take a 10-minute break and see how we proceed. Meeting is suspended for 10 minutes. Thank you so much.